wire tools to cut it. And if you're making a few things, it's nice just to wedge up like several balls of clay so you don't have to go clean your hands in between each thing that you're making. You've just got a few ready to go. I'd recommend at least 2, maybe 3 or 4, just depending. Also, when you're cutting it, try to cut it like sort of square. Don't cut these little thin slices, because if you just cut it, then you gotta kind of ball that up. Start with it in a ball already. It's gonna just work a little better for you. And a lot of people have a hard time with the wedging, but I'll show you how to do it wrong. Is they start to just pressing one area and they just flatten it out and they get this big flat thing. What you want to do is kind of keep the pressure sort of in, so that it stays whole in like a more of a ball sort of. And similar to kneading dough, just kind of rocking it forward and pulling it back. And what it's doing is it's aligning all the clay particles in the same direction, so everything's lined up when you're throwing it on the wheel. It just kind of helps it throw a lot nicer. When you're very first learning, you probably wouldn't notice the difference so much between the wedged clay and the not wedged clay. And so don't waste your whole first day wedging. A lot of people get hung up on that and they're just like wedging for the whole first like 30 minutes of class. And just because you won't notice the difference anyways. And it can also get the air bubbles out of the clay, which air bubbles can be sort of a pain when you're throwing and you feel this air bubble in there. And air bubbles can explode in the kiln too as the air expands, as it's heated up.
Okay.
And has nowhere else to go. It's going to blow right through the air bubble.
Is there a difference in the feel of it when it's just cut after?
There is, but when you're first learning, you wouldn't be able to really notice the difference so much.
Okay.
So that's why I also say, when you're first learning, it's more about getting a feel for it. You're not trying to, if you do make something, I'm really happy that you did, but you're more just getting a feel for it. Don't expect like your first thing, you're just going to make this pot on your first,
Right. Yeah.
You want to start with like somewhere between a baseball and a softball as far as how much clay to use. And I think,
How long do you need to do that?
this is recycled clay, so it takes a little more
Okay.
on the stuff that you're using in the bag, maybe like 33 reps or so.
Okay.
The more you do it, the better it kind of works. Bigger pieces take a lot more, at least bigger pieces take a lot more wedging, at least like 100 reps on a bigger piece. So that's probably enough for this, but you can kind of see it sort of spiraling up.
Mm-hmm.
Smooth out any little creases or anything. Sometimes this can lead to cracks later down the line. So yeah, after you've got it wedged up, then you're going to want to get it stuck to the wheel head. And you can sort of smack it down, and just sort of patting it down nice and round kind of helps. If it comes off like sort of square and you put it on there, now you got some squares. You want to just use this to kind of get it as in the middle as you can when you get it stuck to the wheel head. And you'll see there's these circles, lines on all the wheel heads, and that's going to just kind of tell you that you're in the middle. Alright, so now we got it stuck on there. This is where it really starts. The first step, whatever, wedging your clay and sticking it to the wheel head. The first step is centering the clay. So what you're doing is you're just gonna, this is the hardest part everyone has trouble with. Once you get it centered, the rest is pretty easy. But I'm gonna kind of use like this part of my hand here to sort of lean into it. And I'm bracing my arm on my body here. And I can even just lean into it with my body weight and just hold it in one spot. Always make sure you got enough water for it to slide through your hands. When you're doing the centering, it helps out the wheel spinning a whole lot faster. because you got to wait for it to turn around a bunch of times. So if it's going really slow, you're going to be sitting there that much longer waiting for it to turn around. So you want it faster when you're, for the centering part of it. So as I press into it, it's going to make the clay taller. So to kind of keep it round, sort of squared, I'm going to use one hand on top also to keep it from getting too tall. So by pressing down, it's going to get shorter. So on the side taller, press on top, it's going to get shorter. And so you want to find like kind of in between there, where you're pressing with one hand on the side and one hand on top, and you'll start to feel the clay just sort of come into place. And you really just need to be leaving your hands on it. Don't come in, do it for a second. Don't come. You want to sit there with it for a little bit and give it enough time to turn around. If you start to feel it like sort of dry, just get some more water, put it on there. Let's try to knock it off real quick. So I'm just going to be bracing my arm on my body. Just going to hold real steady and lean into it. So that way I don't have to muscle it. I can just sort of brace my arm, and I'm using my body weight in order to just lean into it. If you're up here trying to hold it, you want your arms to be kind of relaxed on your legs. That's what these are for. If your leg's not tall enough to get up over the side of the wheel, you've got these that you can put a foot on just to get your leg up a little higher. That way you have something to lean on. And I'd say, I show people this, like, to kind of help them, like, understand the concept a little bit, is that pretend your arm is almost like this. If this was like a machine or a robot or something, it would just come in here and center it up. So kind of think of your arm as just like the board almost. So after you gotten it centered, the next step is to put a hole in it. So step 1, center. Step 2, hole. And there's not like a wrong or right way to do this. I like to do it with my left hand, pressing down, and my middle finger is kind of my strongest finger. And then I'll have the ring finger just next to it, just to kind of support it, so it's not one finger just getting pushed around. The 2 fingers together is a little more solid. And also I'm going to rest my arm on my leg. I'm actually going to, as I'm pressing down with my left hand, I'm going to use my right hand to steady my left hand and just hold it all in one spot. And before you get to the bottom, you want to stop, or you'll have a hole in the bottom. So stop before you get to the bottom. And if you're having a hard time just gauging the depth of like how thick the bottom is, you can stop it, take the needle tool, poke it, slide your finger over the top. And now I know the bottom's about that thick, which, it's about 1 centimeter is what you're going for. You don't want it too thick, because it'll just, when it goes to fire, the water that's left in that clay is going to have nowhere to go when it starts to boil as it heats up in the kiln. So if it's really thick, the water's got to get through that wall of clay, and you'll get explosions from it being too thick also. So you don't want it super thick. And don't worry about it being too thick, because in the next class I'm going to show you how to trim the pot, and that'll remove some of the clay off the bottom. So you don't have to worry too much about that, but it's about the thickness of your bottom that you're going for at the end. So after step 1, center. Step 2, make a hole. Step 3 is to open it up. I'm going to do that just by pulling it straight back towards myself. I'm still, I got my arm braced. As I say, you're always kind of trying to brace yourself on something, so you're not just up here kind of getting thrown around. You want to be more relaxed. And wherever you set the pedal to, it's going to stay. You don't have to keep your foot on the pedal. So just open it up. Got my sponge on the outside just to kind of help steady it, but I'm letting the inside do all the work. And at this point, there's a little bit of water in the bottom, so I'm going to get it out with the sponge. And I can also just sort of smooth that off at the same time, smooth out the bottom with the sponge. And from here, I'm just going to start lifting the walls straight up. You don't want to go, you don't, as I'm making a bowl with this, but you don't want to start shaping the bowl till the end. You don't want to go out until you're ready. It's a lot harder to get the clay to go back in than it is to get it to go out. So you start with it sort of in, and then at the end you're going to work it out. So just going to put pressure on the inside and on the outside. I've got my left hand is still making contact with my right hand for all my points of contact. I've got my right arm rested on my leg. I'm just going to start putting pressure on it, and as I put the pressure on it, the clay has nowhere else to go, so it's going to start lifting itself up. I just do it a little at a time. I start at the bottom, I work to the middle, and get to the top. Don't try to do it all in one move. I see a lot of beginners, they do this thing where they just start going like this. Like, you want to let it spin around for a little bit, because this is still going that fast. So if you pull it up faster, then it has time to turn around. You're going to get one wall is going to be thicker than the other, and it's just going to start kind of wobbling around on you. So you're better off just taking your time and going really slowly, and just working your way up slowly. Never really going faster than it turns. So that's about as up as I need it to be for a bowl. So here I'm going to start to I'm going to do the next pull up, but I'm also going to start going out with the next pull. So now it's starting to take on this bowl shape. Well, if you want to go in, you go in, but it is always tougher to get it to go back in. So that's why I say don't go out until you're ready. So give it a couple of those to shape it.
Are you doing that kind of almost at an angle pulling it?
Yeah. So the first few pulls I did like just as a cylinder, just keep it straight up, and then after I've kind of got my cylinder as tall as I want it to be, then after that I'm going to start to pull it out. Yeah. And so if you were making a vase or something tall, you would just go straight into a cylinder. You wouldn't do the part where you really press out so much. You want to allow it to stay in closer. But the bowl's the basic thing, like everyone kind of learns at first. It's your basic thing, and it has a little of everything because you make the cylinder, but then you pull it out also. But before I go too far out, I'm going to remove some of this clay off of the bottom with the wooden knife tool. And you're just going to cut into it. Remove some of that clay on the bottom. I'm holding this with two hands as I do it too. Just always kind of helping myself get steady. One hand, it gives you the opportunity to wobble around more. You want to be kind of more firm and steady. So that's why I use the two hands. And then another thing you can do, if you want the finger marks, just use your hands to shape it. If you want a smoother bowl, we've got these flexible rubber ribs you can sort of pull it into and shape it with the rubber rib. And then you can always smooth off the top, the lip of it with the sponge. Just make sure it's nice and round. In the next class, I'm going to show you about how to trim the bottom of it. So, I like to clean the profile up with this wooden knife tool, but also you don't have to worry about it too much at the same time because we're going to come back later after it's dried up a little bit and cut away some of this clay that's on the bottom to trim it. But then, we've got a bunch of different ribs. Some have like little serrated designs in them that you can press into the clay with. I'm just going to use the edge of this one and just kind of give it a little design like that. And just sort of give it one more spin to round it back out. And that's pretty much the bowl. When you're all done with it, you can cut it off with the wire tool. So with a wire, you're going to want to